Nyeba gunle namdolishin yunde gunge gemba sunje gunge nyen chego tanje gemba gunjanse amen chege enge padane dusun sangye gunge wo nasum chego nasum dense Zaiwe lami shabla sawaide. Kumar dambichu nyamsu limbi kunlung sambo tarba tukdiki samba nijung dang deyantini rani kunichido mayinpar rashin simjin tamchiki dundu jigiyu sambi janchukki simba dembekoni dambichu tepa sambekoni nyamsu limba shuyus.
Please start by browsing the excellent motivation for the teachings, which consist of two parts. The first part that we need to bring to mind is our wish, the genuine wish to attain liberation. That wish is known also as renunciation mind. And another side to our motivation, to our intention, is the genuine wish to attain that liberation, not just for one's own sake and one's own benefit, but in order to free all sentient beings, to bring them to that state of perfect happiness and freedom. That is known as the mind of awakening, bodhicitta. So then in that spirit of renunciation and bodhicitta, please listen to the teachings.
Tadini ngazu Gyud Lama di tawa tembe shumru zogodi da tawa di dini gombe goni nyamsu lembu goyre ni nyamsu lemba la lamge rimba chila teni nyamsu lembu goyo bayindu ngazu lamge rimba goyo shubi goyo dan dela dini kasa denda zo da namba ngata gochiki yobe namni 자진 몰랐나 숨쉬어가다가 그니 가상한서 다단도 람기 땡 세디 가르치 보고 스팅 군심서 근데 아니 다주주도 대전시가 신년선도 담배주도 수신주는 발제마 세력분도 단주주고 쉬어서 다디 쉬스네 되니 다되니 되니 이봐 lamto che ki shirap se ni lamti rangula yang da go chi ke ba che shirap na ba sum ke rimba la te ni ke gu go es di shu be ga be na ni te te be shirap sam be shirap ni ko ko shu su ni gom chung ni shirap ni shu be ga.
We are studying the text entitled the Ultra Tantra Shastra in Sanskrit, Gyud Lama in Tibetan, or can translate in English roughly as the highest continuum. It's the treatise that expounds on the view, the Buddhist view, the view that we then sustain by means of our own personal practice of meditation. And so the way then to practice the view, the way to take that knowledge that we acquire from this treatise and put it into practice is taught in the 5 stages of the path. And that's what we are concerned with now. Right? There's these 5 stages that we utilize in order to put into practice the view taught in the Gyud Lama Tantra. Those 5 stages were outlined in the Mahamudra Aspiration Prayer. Among those 5, the first stage, the first point, is known as the support that we all need to obtain in order then to practice the path. As for that, the text reads, verse 4, being free and well-favored, endowed with faith, exertion, and insight, relying on an excellent spiritual friend and receiving the fifth instructions, may we encounter no obstacles to practicing them correctly, and may we practice the holy Dharma through all our lives. So that verse refers to the support, and we have already covered that. And now we are concerned with the second stage of the path. That's our prajna, or insight, right? Our wisdom. Here we speak of the three types of insight: the one that comes from study, the one that comes from integrating the teachings by means of reflection, and the insight that comes from our practice of meditation. So here then we have finished the explanation of the first two types of insight, and now we are looking at the third, the one that comes from practicing the Dharma. And also Khenpo mentioned earlier, I should insert it here, sorry, that when we talk about this wisdom or insight, it's something that we absolutely need to possess in order for the genuine, authentic path to really take place in our lives, right? So for that, we can't do without these three types of insight, and now we are concerned with the third type.
남도지기 시랍디 가상 슝 김남 자와나가 노릭트베 미시 디블 맹아서 태즈문나 검중 외기 내로 지신스 시랍순게 나와테 쇼스 디기 된다고.
The three types of insight are explained in verse 5 of the Mahamudra Aspiration prayer that reads, studying scriptures and reasoning frees from the obscuration of ignorance. Contemplating the oral instructions conquers the darkness of doubt. The light born of meditation illuminates the natural state just as it is. May the brilliance of the three prajnas, of the three types of insight or wisdom, increase.
시랍순 세게다 저거 대선 검순 나세기요. 되니 다 퇴선 검순 세디 말한수 남배기 남린 차상기 동시 프레임워크라고 차리기요. 내가 준비도 차리기요. 되는 것도 예시진 쉬고요.
The three insights, the three prajnas, pretty much it's the same as what we say: study, reflection, meditation. The three very important processes that really serve as a framework for all Buddhists, regardless of their affiliation.
가장 검중기 시랍값을라 검중 외기 내룩 지신살세 찍는다. 아니 검세지다 내룩세지다 두다조 니요에서 쉬어와. 나대나니더니 가상 검세에다 지당 가르치라고 그래. 아니 조디다 검세디 그러바다 냥디 대화단 분이 두사기 짜와 심 기땡글라 바샤상이 라틴이 준비요가 인디 근데 검세에다 돌디나 심기 균기 차디 매바스에다 윤댕기 차디 곰벌도 타이기 탑람기 림바지 말이야. gomji chelo chilo gom sige yes ta chidan ko gyachin ko tawas mo da deshu ta de da nyam do de ni ma zo ta so so chi nyamlen la jar yong du nam yu gom nyamlen yan sige de ni ma zo bebe nyamlen se sig de la ta nyongwa la jar ba musu la len ta be che tang ni nguindi kibu damban namki zeba tinle tenzola lema cheba tenzola gogile ese ta di kazami shu ta diring tini nipa ta niluk se niluk jishin se niluk se ta kari se di kora deshi shu
Everything to do with the mind, right? Because the mind really is the root of both cyclic existence, samsara, and state beyond suffering, which is nirvana. It's the root of all of our suffering, of our happiness. And so meditation in that way works with the habitual tendencies that have been placed or sort of planted in our mind stream. In what way does meditation work with those habitual patterns and tendencies? Well, in the process of meditation, what we do, we utilize many different methods, many different techniques that purify our mind of its faulty neurotic patterns, the disturbing ones, and in its place, it makes our beautiful enlightened qualities flourish, right, and increase evermore. So that, in kind of a broad sense of meditation, is this kind of process, the path of using those skillful methods to work with the habitual tendencies of the mind. And I also further thought that in Tibetan we use another word rather than meditation, which is gom. But we also say the word that's translated usually as practice, nyamsoleng, to take as our own experience, right? What we say in English, practicing. Well, in Tibetan, the word practice has three different flavors, three different connotations. The one is to really gain experience, kind of to take the teachings and take them into one's own personal experience. That's called practicing. Another sense is that using the techniques and teachings directly on the spot in our lives, in all those difficult situations that present themselves, right? Using the Dharma. That's what we call practice. And the third way to understand this term is really the practice of imitating the way of being of sacred, holy beings of the past or of the present too, right? How they behave, how they spend their lives. So we try to imitate those ways. That's another way to understand the word practice. So that's for meditation. And today we'll continue the explanation of the second term, in English translated as the natural state. So what is this natural state as it is, as the text states?
다치당 아주 남바 산지 되게 따뜻히 가실라 가나서 출바다 눈에 강에 요다 탐지디 가니 연구열에서 먼저 지당 딘데나 진이라서 되게 되시고 이내야다 대답 탐지기 잡아다고디 가르치는 게 아주 주요한 거를 동안용 거를 써요. 니루디 마살와 니루디 마토바다 니루디 하마고 데라 남기면서 마리파스 규 마리파를 때니니 군중당 동네대마 차상 연구였습니다. 디자도다 니루디 살레라 내가 좀 쉬우자. 나디안티니 군중디 다 가르치기로 해서는 니루 지신 살 수도 있다. 배낭아주 제발 값을래요. 니루라 고아지기게 봐. 이나 대삼기는 다도 지신 세트고요. 삼바 제발 값을래요. 하더니 용아지기게 돼. 다동이 하더니 지신도 세트고요. 다 단다 아니 공중기 때문에 검용도 신이 되니 똑 용와디 똑배 먹을 있니 아니 니루코랑 지마 지신 가래이 받들라 도굴 내베거니 똑 용거 했어. 다디 공중외기 내가 지신 세스디 아주 공중 똑 순간은 또 똑같은 줄 알고 와. 근데 뒤문에 다닌다 난기 수수도 용하다 치기 나와다 자상로 교회 친구지 됐고 어쨌든 가상의 비 최세죠 gyurse kechen go shedwa penangaran sulata mitape goate manjule yore nyawati skapore toga yo mare chesantini mitape ki gowa yone manasu susuki misenanga mitape kangi theyondu ya lamsan kangi de setu ti garijin yo go sulata mitape toga de de nilu 지신 세스르다 고명도 아니 고가 점심 또배대랑 길게 기르더니 아니 비와 친구시 되고 그래서
Generally, when we speak about the Buddhist philosophy at large, we identify the cause of all of our suffering, of our problems, of our difficulties as the 12 links of dependent origination, right? That's in the general philosophical vehicle of the Buddha Dharma. But if we were to make it a bit more specific, we have to say that all those causes come down to one, right? All the 12 links that actually really come down to one, the real cause or root of our confusion, of our suffering, of our pain. So what is that root? What is that cause? Well, it's simply known as ignorance, which is, if we were to define it, elaborate on it, which is the absence of clear understanding, even more than that. It's the absence of realization of the natural state as it is, right? That kind of us lacking that realization of how things truly are, that lack of realization is known simply as one word as ignorance. And that is the origin of suffering. If we think about the Four Noble Truths, the origin of suffering, right? We can really summarize the different sources of our pain and discontentment is just this one word, ignorance. And therefore, it's really of utmost importance, really quite crucial for all Buddhists to work on clearing that cause away, right? To kind of getting rid of it. And if you look at the text here, it says the light born of meditation illuminates the natural state as it is. So now, if you think about study, the first process, right? When we just encounter the Dharma, we receive the teachings, we study the teachings, the same. Listen, study, hear, means the same process. Does that really illuminate the natural state as it is? Not really, because what we gain from studying is just intellectual understanding, which is good in itself, but that's not going to illuminate, right? Make it for us extremely clear the natural state as it is. Then we proceed to integration of that knowledge that we have received in the process known as reflection. And here's the same reflection, or that integration of the teachings with ourselves is not going to really illuminate the natural state as it is. It's good, it's going to give us experiential, right, understanding of the Dharma, not just intellectual, but still that experience is not enough to really illuminate the true nature of phenomena as it is. So really it's only through the process of meditation, through the practice of meditation, that we're going to arrive at that realization. So now we're not using the word understanding, we're not using the word experience, we're going to use the word realization, right? That's what what happens for meditation is we take our experiences that we gain through reflection and they get transformed, or we transform those experiences into a stable realization. Right? That process of transformation of experience into continuous and stable realization is known as meditation. Right? That happens without us adding anything to basically what we come to see, realize the natural state as it is without exaggerating or denying anything, undermining it. We see as it is, right and clear. And when we have that type of realization, the outer life, like kind of our outer phenomena in our life are going to change too. Remember, I have mentioned not once that Dharma is a word, true in Tibetan, really means transformation. So what's going to happen is that our life is going to change when we have realization. Well, let's take, for example, the teaching on impermanence. When we just study and learn about it, we get some understanding. So most of us, we understand impermanence and what is meant by it. Do we really have experience? Do we have an experiential understanding of impermanence? Well, that's hard for most of us, right? That's hard. Realization? No, we don't. And so when we just then stay on that level, when we understand impermanence, that understanding itself is not enough to clear away suffering from our lives. When something bad befalls us thinking about impermanence, I understand it. It's not going to cut it, right? It's not enough to clear away the real pain and discontentment and suffering from our lives. What we need, right? We need realization of impermanence, right? First experience and then the transformation into real, clear, and stable realization. And then our lives are really going to be affected by the Dharma, by our realization of impermanence, right? It's really going to change our lives. So it's really realization that in that way that transforms our lives. And that realization happens when we meditate, when we practice. So it's that in that way, it's meditation that allows us to gain that realization, or in other words, illuminating the natural state as it is.
Zachitang iluk segila niluk sini pichitangirela kakala rangsin pichitangire tini kakala maso dundamik te bas tini pichitangire da kanda ko debuchina chidang jeba ina niluk se di nguyeki nichu dela tini chi kin gana rumba chila tini sui shaba, jue shaba, 망보 뉴도 땅샤보다 누뉴 마루스 샤바 되네 많이 맞지 그랑 그래 임발라 임비기 내당들라 가르치고 있었네 니로 상시가
Let's look at the term itself, natural state. We also have other words to describe, or like other synonyms really for the natural state. Another one is just to say nature, and another one is to say the ultimate truth. All of that refer really to the true nature of all phenomena, their natural state, their nature, their ultimate truth of phenomena as it is. And what is that nature? It's something that is completely uncontrived. That is to say that no one or no any external conditions meddle with that nature, for example, altering it in any possible way, right? Making it bigger or more, or making it, what was a lot, making it smaller, right? Usually conditions can interfere and in this way alter, modify anything. But nature is exactly something that cannot be affected, modified, or altered by any other conditions or circumstances. That's the kind of a definition of what we mean by natural state.
다 단다카 수밥에 아주 니룩딜라티니 고안이 닝부고요 다 던담 타르두기 니룩 세지 다티니 군수 람기 니룩 세 니가 먼저기 하고니 냄새니 담보 군수 람기 니룩 된수 무엇이니 되니 타르두기 던담 니룩기 또고 티인데다 니룩들라 니룩 시비고 무에니 수치다 시요라 무에니 수들라니 군주기 무에니 수치다 던담기 무에니 수치 도스다 냠레는 잡아야나 도스가 와리네 누르고
In the Buddha Dharma, we identify two aspects of the natural state. The one is the ultimate, final natural state, right? How things are ultimately in their nature. But another aspect of what we mean by saying natural state or nature phenomena is the relative natural state, which is still kind of unfolds on the path. It's not the final destination yet, but it's the process of the path, and it's relative, but yet still it's the nature. And it's when we talk about practice, we actually need to know that there are these two sides. It's extremely important because there's a process that it's by first recognizing the relative nature of phenomena on the path, that we then, by relying on that, need to realize the ultimate final natural state of phenomena, right? So when we speak about in this way, like true nature of phenomena as it is, we don't always mean ultimate, okay? We also mean relative nature of phenomena as it is. So there's these two aspects that we need to understand when it comes to the practice.
따치당 아주 군주기 니룩디 아주 갈라간선지 단단히 삼보땅이 되는 수수 제바제바이나 삼보땅이요. 다 전담기 니룩든주 다 뒤수 고거와 랑상지 삼보땅이 도서 가고 그 시라기 사바지 차들이
Generally, the reality of nature phenomena we can grasp with our minds right now, right? By using our intelligence, we can think about how things are, we can analyze, investigate how things are, and we can arrive at some understanding, and that is the relative nature of phenomena. So we can really conceive of it with our minds at the moment. But the ultimate nature of phenomena is more profound, and really it takes time for us to be able to really grasp how it is.
다 담보 아주 냠는지도 군주디 내룩서에 도와주지 아주 선호한 거. 이 간데에서는 다 배나 아주 능바지인 비찬이다 담보 덴바시기 니수된 줄라 간데레도 둥아디 문이 둥에 덴바 숨샤바도 둥에 덴바레도 그랬어. 이 데줄라 samotani 거기 봐. 대가나신들이 군중 복바 람 산지고 숨샤바도 둥아디 군중을 때니 중바레세디 왜니 소리도 말이고 복바디 람을 때니 중바레세도 간데레시. 안 대단데 중기다 아주 문이 냠는 제기에는 배는 덴바시든 저이네요. दुनिया के खरांगला दिने खरांग मिदा बाई बाता दुंगा बाई बाता तोंबाई बाता तामे बाई बाता अनि देदां दे नाशिं के कुंजुं के तेबाता कोबे तेबा लासो बाला मासु नाति देशी मिदा जुडु सने तिले सुनो खरांग केता छिनि तेबा रेरे नंबर दिने दिनजोला दिने समतानिदा गोमि용 되다 또바지에 주고 다 둥에 되문이 둥에기 된바 레샤 둥에기 된바디 미다버랑신 둥에버랑신 군중한 미다바다 둥한다 똥바다 다메레샤 사메기니 똑바디니 기 진주야 군주기 니수지차디
So first of all, let's look at the relative nature. How is it? For example, for the Buddhists, the teachings on the Four Noble Truths are extremely important, right? The truth of suffering, of the origin, cessation, and the path. So now, if we are concerned with the relative nature of phenomena, we can ask the question: so is it then true that all of them are suffering, that there is a cause of suffering, that actually there is the end of suffering, there is the path towards that end? Is it really the case? Is it true? Is it right? Is it how the phenomena truly are in relative sense? So we can think about and analyze, right, using our intelligence, and we can arrive at understanding that it's really the case when we think about the truth of suffering and the four aspects that it consists of. The four aspects of impermanence, suffering, emptiness, and selflessness. Right? Actually, each of the Four Noble Truths has its own four aspects. They're altogether known as the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. It's kind of like what helps us, it's characteristics of each of the truths. So if we want to understand what is meant by suffering, we can think about impermanence, we can think about emptiness, we can think about the lack of truly existing self, of the actual pain in our life, right? And if we reflect and think about them, we can come to realize that it is true. It is really the case, right? The suffering is real. There's impermanence, there's a lack of truly existing self, there's emptiness, that's suffering. That's the case. So that realization, that's how it is. That's the relative nature. Okay, that's at this moment we kind of understand the relative nature of phenomena. Four Noble Truths is the example here, right, that we can use to illustrate that kind of understanding.
배낭한서 딱고디고 빼빼다고 빼순지 슈바이나 말한서 다 니술 지신 마살나 동해 간데스기기도 니술 지신 살베기 람라 침바이나 ngaransu dunge di kandis meba chagdu sini ta sanje gi nisu dine chi sungyorwa ta di ngoni redu maridu sini ngaransu ta chogre shirakale yo mare pesun daboji shubayina ta nga tanda kunzubgi nisu langdor ki jishigyorwa pena ngaransu ta kama kashi chiga ringla ta kama sana mindu jidang susu gido sini mise ki nyongwe ki nangla sambatani tini ta kongto sayadi lang yongdu tini digi lega kandis chigido kongto de tangpo lang yongdu ni susu ki semba di majiba kandis sugido kongdo langba tsamji mayimbar kongdo langbi ki kechik nipa sumba nindini ni nyo gogodo ngumayang nyo song sini deba tang maung pe ki negativity mangbo chik ki jesu yugni dini ko ngala nyoba dinde jesong jeza nge kola dile nyoba dinde skyagi insa me kanda da digi sem ki namdo ngemba ki chik ki jesu la ngemba ni ki jesu la sum chung 아주 녀몽 받으라 타기스 그래 가르레스나 남도 냠바세디 찍게 봐야나 코 바이러스 나신 멀티플라이 차도 그래서 그래 아니 디기 수수라 마기 부지스 아니 수수기 드링기 니마데 톨라타 아니 디기 사니디 수수기 도보든줄라 마기 부스 지소라 마기 부스 결합라 마기 부스 다디 간데 차기도 서봐 되게 되부디 되니 콩도 라용데 수부디기 내사디제 타셰 파레 당다 등산 등중 안주 쉬고 말에 차상기 암지게 안주 랍제디랑 개고도 와 셈발르르제 스리 지 수부를 내사 엄마 충충 여받는 저 축심부 시부차 내사 매베게 되니 다 셈니다 포발라 먹어 봐라 콩도 라용데 타도단 덴셈단 내셈단 다 네게티비티 기 룹디 시우지 차용 거라 봐. 되니 디기 리당 셈당 랑당 지소 니가라 동아지 뚱용도 다디 간데레도 사메야 삼로치다. 봐. 다 대단 대신도 수수기 콩도 란샤바들라 미닥바다 다 잠닝제다 되니 서바티스 검샤 되니 이제 서바금be 페인도 쯤바지는 콩도 랑바 대가라지 파 참샤샤 바이나 내게 소소게 셈레 시대 가지고 되기도 뇨다 첨보도 뇨다 중중 간디 수고도 그러봐 대가나신 소소 차과 첨보제나 내게 가주 연한 당규 매비기 동아 간디 되기도 아니 소소게 셈바들라 촉셰지 제샤 바이나 아니 내게 소소 게르당 아니 소소 코리우다 지소 차상라 대화 간디치 중고도 뇨다 충중 간디치 차기도 다 딘줄라 삼바당 바이나 대원에 다니다 콩도다 서바 대가나신 되샤다 초셰 딘주기 아니 연에 야도 메네 야도 이거 왜 니술라 삼바당니 랑더 제바이나 딜라카르세나 군줍기 니룩라 아니 냠린 제바 시거래 아주 칼레시다 민도와 수수기 콩동 아주 랑기래 다 초셰다보다 아주 수정 아주 마뉴지마도 수수 미신나라 용거래라 지초그러 봐 지용도 디기 편에 간데도 삼바탄 랑도 제에들라 아니 가르치게서는 군줍기 니술라 냠린 제바스 랍초그래
To make it a bit easier to understand, I'll use example that we all can relate to, right, to understand this relative nature of phenomena. We think about how suffering arises, right? And we don't need to think about some theories. I really mean like just in your life personally, right? Your experience, something that you can see for yourself in your own life, right? And the question is, well, how does realization of the natural state is going to help us, right, to eliminate that suffering? And how does the lack of that realization is going to just propel that suffering more and more, right? That's the question here that we can ask ourselves and see for ourselves. So now to think about the nature of phenomena on the relative level, we can use the example of the teachings on what to accept and what to avoid. And we all know there is this formula in the Buddha Dharmas, things that we need to practice and try to kind of adopt in our life, and things that we need to avoid in our life. So, and we need to think about our own experiences. Well, let's think about anger. And what does anger really do to our minds, right? We all can relate to that, I'm sure. So if we think about anger and then like being really frustrated or even more like enraged, how unhappy our minds become. And not only in the moment of anger, but it really propels that, it sort of accumulates more and more. Then we have the next moment and the third moment, and what happens? We start spinning, we start having all this rumination. Okay, I'm angry because they have done that to me in the past. Oh, how will that I will harm them in the future, or all those kind of, right away we have the whole narrative right there, connected with the past, with the future, right? And a lot of negativity that comes from with that. That's how our minds work when we get angry and we narrate the story, right? It's a lot of past and future negativity attached to the moment of the present. And so we can, basically what happens, we get sucked into that anger. We follow after it. We get seduced by those states of mind, and we sort of give in. And then from that comes other disturbing emotions. That's why they are called technically subtle developers. Literal translation. Subtle developer means it's like virus. It starts from something very subtle, something small, one cell, and it then develops and multiplies, right? Like how a virus multiplies. It may, takes over other cells. And so that's what's happening to us. We have one moment of anger, like one cell, and then like virus, right? It catches it sort of grabs the next moment and the next, and then before we know it, we are also jealous. We also, already planning some kind of retribution, or we get proud, and we're wasting our day. At the very least, we're wasting that moment and the day of us getting angry. But what happens is that we don't stop there, right? Because as I said, it kind of develops like virus, multiplies. Then we go out and we sort of spoil, the day of our friends with our bad attitude. And then from friends, we move to other people, and then we move to the whole country, and that's what happens. From one moment of anger, it just grows more and more and more, and we can think what the result of that, right, is really sad. Not to mention that what anger does to our body, physical body, blood pressure, stress, that tensions in our body. And we all know it because these days doctors tell us right away, well, we need to try to be not so stressed, you need to relax, right? Because if you were not sick before with this kind of tension and anger, you're going to get sick, right? Or if you were a little bit sick, you're going to get really much worse if you don't just try to relax and be at ease. Basically, we sort of enter into this loop of negativity. From anger, we get jealous, proud, and we have desire. And it's not only anger. I'm not talking only about anger and how that affects and harms our mind and our body, and then it harms the minds and bodies of those around us, right? We can think about that, and we can, we're still talking about anger here, right? We can think about it, and then we can think, well, but what if at that moment when I get angry, I reflect on impermanence, I develop compassion, I cultivate patience, I think about all the benefits of those practices and how does those affect us, right? So we can really see that for ourselves. And we can think also of desire, of our insatiable desires, right? There's no end to them. That's the point. And then we can compare that to contentment, the state of mind that's just happy and content with whatever we have. So we now see which of those really pains you, harms you, and around beings and people around you, and then further the whole society, the country, other countries, right? And which one gives you the peace of mind. And so we can see that for ourselves with the anger and patience, with desire and contentment, we able to analyze the situation and arrive at that very clear understanding. Well, that's very clear. What's the nature, right, of what to accept and what to avoid? It's evident. So that understanding is concerned with the relative nature of phenomena, right? How things are on the relative level, right? To avoid anger, cultivate patience, try to get rid of these insatiable desires, cultivate contentment. We can really understand that nature, relative nature, through our own personal experience, right? So that's example of the first type of natural state, the one that's concerned with the relative level, relative truth of phenomena.
Dordina Ranshin Suyina yang Dungal Dugyo Mare, Deva Dugyo, Deva Tok Dugyo. Tingaran Sukita, innate quality Taware. The Indi, the Kandar Sanjiki Sunayanda, Masunayanda, Chi Dordina Ranshin Lusim Nigala Nebaina di Majene Yagarwa. Ranshin ki Lusim Nigala Pembajena di Jegurwa. Ta Kondro da Subanyiki, Gari Pengitu, Gari Nugudu. Tianti Negabla something tang you mare. Gyurme some tango. Kapkabla yang Kondro de Jig, Negabla, Penguin Sudo, the Neon Sigrwa. So lung Lani Mill sick Nimbaji lap to the Kamakashi the same Jig. Satisfaction to young Sibarwa. Hinayanta digitini Pe Mambo Shire, and also Dick Blade ki sola Dangzi Shani, Mi Hamagowachi, Dangzi the Dukes Chelik Dabaina, second Kashi ring Amada Yorwa. Hinayanta ko Chile di Dumbuni la Chardu, Dungan Shidaga Unimus Yongo, Nazu Yomo Mambuch Tinde, Nazu Manche, short sighted Chardu, Nikapke, satisfaction ki Jesu Yugni, then Maribi want to show to the Ba. That Dordina, Pemba di Jegugure, nobody Jigio Mare, then Penny Negola Mamba Pula Samotani, Mazutus, Taji Jebaina, then Niluk said it, and Salbudi Soso Zero to Niluk Jishin says Sumbarwa.
Since all beings want to avoid suffering and want to be happy, which is just innate equality of everyone, right? We can understand what I have been speaking about really ourselves. Really, it doesn't matter if the Buddha has stated it or not. If something that we do or experience harms our body, our mind, that's to avoid, because we don't want to suffer, right? It's innately built in all of us. So don't think about the Buddhist teachings in this moment. If you just physically and mentally suffer and it harms you, that's bad for you. Avoid it. And if something benefits you, well, do that, right? It's a very simple way. And we can really understand in this way, comparing anger, our own anger, and us being tolerant, being patient. Think about whether it harms us or benefits us. And here we shouldn't think about the short-term benefits, because sometimes when we release our anger and say something nasty to someone, for a moment we might feel some satisfaction. That's not the benefits, right? Because in the long run, it's not going to improve our state of mind or our body, right? We give an example in the Dharma for those kind of short-sighted short-sighted ideas that, oh, but it just gave me satisfaction. Well, it's like licking honey that was put on the blade of a razor. So there's a razor, it has a sharp blade, and there's a honey, and we lick it. And for a moment, we might enjoy honey and its sweetness, just for a very short moment. But afterward, we're going to cut our tongue, and it's going to be a long-lasting pain. So same like that. Anger and really losing our temper with others might provide those few short, sweet moments, so to say, but ultimately it's going to cut us and it's going to create long-lasting pain. So we shouldn't be short-sighted, as we often are. And so all of this then happens because of our ignorance. So then, seeing it for ourselves, right? Seeing it in our life that, wow, okay, the patience has this really long-lasting benefit, not something temporary, but really kind of a lasting one. So this is good for me. That is actually, as it says here, illuminating the natural state as it is, the relative natural state as it is, has been illuminated for us when we have this kind of insight. And we all can have it. Sorry, he said it actually before, that we all can relate to this. So this relative nature can be understood by all of us. Really, it's not that hard, okay? Because we can all relate to this kind of example I just am giving you, right? About anger and patience.
다 dorдина ngaranzula namdo de manchewa sangi ni yure namdo ngembati ke yongdu ngwedang shuksu lysim ni ka thudu gore ndila dungan se gore namdo sangbo de ke yongdu semdang lui ni ka matukpa shiwa se gore cha yong gore dela nganju nambi dewa se gore ko dewa chena dinde yongdu da namdo ngembati ngô sim tukpa yinpa tang dunghe ge gyu yinpa ngö senye tang namdo sangpo di ani sim shiwe ge gyu yinpa ngö simpa tila kare se gore sena tini kunzub ki niluk tokpa niluk jishin sawa niluk shepa dus kowa lena tanga zo peche kare se gore we dos kodya mendo des.
This way we all have thoughts, right? Good thoughts and bad thoughts. And we again here to make it even more easy to understand, I think if I just tell you that, right, the bad negative thoughts, look how they disturb your mind, look how they disturb your body, how they cause your pain and suffering. And then look at the wholesome thoughts, constructive ones, and how they don't disturb your mind and body, and how they really make you feel at peace and experience happiness and well-being. So when we want to realize the natural state, relative natural state, when we want to eliminate it, we can identify, we should recognize, right? With our own minds, intelligence, we can really analyze and identify, right, the negative thoughts, that's what they do. They cause my suffering, they disturb my peace of mind and actual physical well-being. The wholesome constructive thoughts, right, that's what they do. They provide peace and ease for my body and mind. Identifying that, we can call that recognition, elimination of the natural state as it is, the relative natural state. We can say that we understand the nature of phenomena, we understand it, we realize it, we illuminate it. So that's about the relative nature.
Kongro tang, kongro nyimik di, kongro langba tang, kongro se tsik di gowa tang lamsang jik da di yabu me nga la nyugu yu samba jik samlo koto ba tang. Ani soba se laba tang lamsang jik di yabu yi nga la goya jin samba da wo di la jik dangwa ge ba rwa, top tu lo ge ba. Dine dega na shi ge dechak se ki samlo di ko yong ba tang tsik dunzo amcholo goyongde dati yakbo chime digi nyokta sugu ye sambata wachikda chokshe shi laba tang dati ge chimbo chi ani di ngarang la gogu ye sambata dinde gi chik langdor sikirwa ngarang su 추식 비주 당바이나 간다다 찍디 칙 고바당 수술라 초바드 레바당 지 야고메 삼바지 람상 초르도 바지 찍디드니 칙 고바당 삼로 코바당 람상디 야고지 삼바도지 딘데기지 셈바들라 랑싱기지 모시에트베 그 뉴바지 렙송바이나다 비제 닐루 군주기 닐루 지신 사바게드니 똑바게 바레스는 비제 랍초그메도
This way, when we just hear the words anger, right? Its faults, we right away feel like, wow, that's not good for me. It harms me. And if we think or hear or patience, or we think about it, read it or we hear it, and we right away feel like, wow, that's good. That's something I really need to develop. I wish to develop it, right? I'm really interested in it. And the same for desire. For example, hearing about desire, we right away feel like aversion, kind of feeling like, no, I don't need that. That's not good for me. It's a troublemaker in my life. Or a contentment, wow, that's something I really wish to cultivate. So when we have that kind of perspective, that's what in Dharmic language we call adopting and avoiding. Like, what to adopt, what to avoid. So when we have that, we can say when we have that power, when we utilize the power of our own mind, of our own intellect, to really recognize what is good for us and what is not, what is to adopt and what is to avoid. That kind of ability to recognize, ability to see clearly, that's when we can say we have realized the natural state as the relative natural state as it is. We have realized the natural state of relative phenomena as it is. So that's, I think, should make it very clear.
시당은 주 벼박기 최된세 직지도와 헬트세디 닝제부지레 스스랑 가레 쳐바디 땡고 그래서 최된세 직디 로와 그냥 알아 샤지 사나 알아 트기메나 디 땡겨요 말아 가르에서 둥아 용거로와 아니 스스라 칼라 가리사네 디 수부 데워차 디기드니 둥아 떼기 메바이나 디파 레가디 제고 그래서 쳐바디 댄스 마트바디니 땡겨요 말해서 디 책임 제보죠 최댄스디 아니 디인데 단다 류기 최된다 셈기 최댄스니 상당적으로 와 다 단다 쉬에든지 조든지 셈기 최댄스에든지 디지디 아주 단다 야와름 부체게 관계 다 예마 유책도 유명히 하고 마서 이내야 직사바지 배줬다니 emotional hygiene는 숨도 봐 physical hygiene 경험 많이 봐 emotional hygiene 딩 안쪽에 랑도르제 디시라 내가 전부도 쓰리다 된소야 원인이라고 차대기 위해서
If we think about the word in Tibetan for health, right, it's actually really interesting. In Tibetan we say choten, in English we say health. So, but etymology of Tibetan word is that it really means relying on what suits me, on relying on what works well for me. That's health in Tibetan. Okay, so for example, if I know I cannot digest fatty, greasy food, so it doesn't suit me, I don't rely on it. I mean, literally, we don't say it. I mean, right? You get the gist. If we use the same words, we don't use it if it's bad for me, right? We don't rely on what's not suitable.
Mm-hmm.
And
benefit.
Literally means kind of agreeable. French is nice, but yeah, suitable. Something that agrees well with me and with my body. And something that doesn't agree well with my body and doesn't suit me, right? I don't use, and what suits me and kind of works well for me, I rely on that. I use that. That's health, right? Then we say that's health. And so, of course, then in this way, we identify mental health and physical health. And here we mainly speak about the mental health. And as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I'm not sure if he really pulled that term or not, if it existed before, but he uses it a lot, emotional hygiene, that we shouldn't only take care of our physical hygiene, but also of emotional hygiene. That's to say, really be careful about what do we do, what do we adopt, what do we really practice, in our life, and what do we avoid, what do we try to really, I guess, reject in our life. So that's emotional hygiene that we are concerned with here, mental health.
다 된수 지당 안수 냠린 제 마제 마도 깔리 가보시라 요 말와 베나 룽 안줄라 랑기레 양갑깔라 소소라 잠닝지 초셰야 끼기레 아니 잠닝지 끼디 리심라 대화 컨디션 것도 디기티니 positive lift effect 컨디션 것도 아니 지 되샤다 드니야 지 greedy 아니 셰당다다 된데기 셈바 nganra 드니기 용디 스스기 리심니가 컨디션 투두도 디기티니 effect of the negative effect of the condition go to ngana to do synergy samlo tangwa ina tin sebu cha yo ba
It's really not that difficult to understand the relative nature of phenomena in this way, because we can really use our own intellect, analyze situations, and see it for ourselves. And we have plenty of situations like that in our lives. Right? So when we are compassionate, when we are patient, how do we feel? Right? That positive attitude, wholesome mindset. How does it feel in our body, our mind, right? How open we feel, how at ease, how happy. And when we feel greedy, right? When we feel uptight or angry, how disturbed our minds become. Again, something that kind of negative influence, negative effect on us. We can see it very clearly. So again, this is something we can understand for ourselves.
and the injikela ina chi this segidwa that the paper kela karisegin ya bahmas positive vibes like ro chi
There are no positive vibes in Tibetan. So Khenpo says, I'm not sure how Tibetans would ever say, but in English we say positive vibes.
paper sigena
I wonder, Khenpo says, if there is Tibetan for positive vibes.
ina ngazu di tenden sortu gere tati energy lamna tis ko de boda ngazu pena lama ti zu yabo jamningje yogan damna kamanga jus dena ji the mig thongju de yo mar de sosole ji di vibe di legre o tenne legre andiga na shi milung chaboji na khoje sala yak kama khashi dewa ina di ji soso magi boro charo do ba digi vibe di lemni
Right, in Tibetan we don't really have a word for vibe, like positive vibes, but we do understand the energy and the effect of energy of other people, right? We know it very well. We spend 5-10 minutes in the presence of someone who has cultivated love, compassion, let's think of a lama, some teacher, spiritual friend, right, who has developed that patience, love, and kindness. And how do we feel just by spending like a few minutes in the presence of such a being, right? How does it affect us? That's energy, because we can't really pinpoint. It's not that we really can say, oh, that's what affects us, right? It's not visible. And the same for someone who is angry and happy, and then we spend time in their presence, and how does that affect us? So obviously we all also in Tibetan we know about energy, we just don't use that term positive and negative vibes.
so piche chege inanda jinlapse 봐.
In Tibetan, really, in Dharmic language, for this positive vibes, we say blessing. From now on, I'm going to translate Chinlap as positive vibes. So.
Tene ta chik di de nga zo
tanga jo nangba yindi sanje ke yang yangdo kharang zo teni tawa kata ki chage shidi demba chi gyo mare sunger ba tadi yangje samla tani teni ngajo komto ba ina ya dia nelu chi cha de yore duje tamji medak ba saje tamji dunga ba che tamji tongshin tamme ba nyangane debe shiwa sayadi susula gang tutup chi dewa yim susula chi dewa jungbe kapsula ya to samla ta chakpatis lakdo kore dewa dila dunga jungbe kapsula ya to samla tang tu ba ina ya di dunga ki chi lup de ro ati lakdo kore pe shira nyeba chumba yore.
Another good example for the understanding of the natural state, relative natural state of phenomena is the teachings on the four seals of Dharma, which are really also fundamental teachings. And thinking about them, analyzing them, or kind of just really recollecting those four statements over and over again is also going to lead us to understanding or illumination, realization of the natural state, right? Thinking about all conditioned phenomena impermanent and so on, the four Dharma seals. So then when we, for example, encounter something very, very pleasant in our lives, we won't develop strong attachment to that happy feeling because we will right away remember, right, the first of the four Dharma seals, all conditioned phenomena not going to last. It's just fleeting, passing, and impermanent. And then when we encounter something extremely negative in our life, not extremely, just something nasty, right, we're not going to be sucked into this loop of negativity that I have mentioned earlier today in the teachings, right? Because again, we will remember impermanence. So that using our intellect, thinking about teachings, remembering them, that's going to really help us to eliminate natural state, in fact, change our lives in that way.
나서 다 teni dortina da ngazu niluk se tela nekap kunjub lamji niluk da thartuk dendam ki niluk se ni samata chokre teni da nekap kunjub lamji nekap niluk se di teni dembashi da ani da zo di susu semgi tengla namdo sange 가르치는 상고 임바당 가르치는 임바 임바든수 수수수수라 용와토라 샤닌디니 남도 녜베기 왕도 쇼바이나 넬루 지신 마살바레 마릭베 왕도 쇼바레 데니 남도 녜바디 녜바 임바 ngosheni 까니 남도 삼베 왕도 땅토바이나 다디 넬루 지신 사와라야 침바레 지신 살다 미살스니 다고 람가 안주이나지 예와 쳐서다 어디 디니 제고도 와 남도 녜베 왕도 송바이나 넬루 지신 미살바라 차송바레 데니 남도 상 녜바디 뇌즈니 남도 상버게 왕도라 땅토바이나 지신 살베게 람가라 침바레 디니스 넬루 지신 사다메서세 다 데안디니 스솔라 지 산제기 숭도 스니 지 디니 김생 짱바 마임바 스소 오니 셈라 동네 셈 투도 주구도 주구민도 스니디니 삼마타니다 오니 다디 남도 멤버 세디 야보 마레도 삼방게시게 해주다 남도 상부 세디 야보 지르샤 삼베기 게시게 바지 중송바이나 아니 닐룩 군줍기 닐룩 지신 살세게 다디 랍초 그래서 도스는다 소소 아주 소소게 남도랑 뇌진베 토니든 랑도르체나 아니 군줍기 닐룩 지신 사와세데 차거래했습니다.
In short, when we speak about the natural state, we divide it into two: relative natural state and kind of realized while we're still in the path, and the ultimate is the final goal. And here to understand that the relative one, we can think about the Four Noble Truths, right? The suffering, the causes of suffering, and as I mentioned, it really comes down to our thinking, to our mind, wholesome mind, unwholesome, right? Kind of really constructive or destructive, we can say in other words. And again, we don't need to analyze it as some kind of a theory we learned from a book, but really take it personally, think about our own lives, our own experiences, and see, well, when I fall under the power of those unwholesome, destructive thoughts, it really does not eliminate the natural state as it is. I am under the power of ignorance. Really, if we see that, if we realize that that's not showing us how things truly are in any clear way, right? Actually making me only more deluded, more confused. We see that, that's right, part of that, understanding. And also if we see, well, when I actually have wholesome, constructive thoughts, right, what do I experience? Actually, that helps me to eliminate the natural state as it is, the relative natural state as it is. So really, the dividing point of whether we do clearly realize the relative nature of phenomena, or we don't realize or don't eliminate the relative nature of phenomena, that dividing line is whether we follow after negative thoughts, destructive thoughts, and their influences, or we choose to cultivate positive, wholesome thinking. Right? And we don't do it just because the Buddha said so, but because we see ourselves the effects those type of two mindsets have on our body, on our mind, on our lives. So having that certainty that comes from our own personal experience, not just because someone said we need to, right? But because we really understand those effects, like of negative thoughts, and that kind of not eliminating the natural state, and the wholesome thoughts, when we follow them, we cultivate them, that really helps us to understand how phenomena truly are. And in this way, we clearly understand what to adopt and what to avoid, right? That clear understanding is the realization of the natural state as it is.
Chidang di nga zu Sanskrit ki klesha se di dini beba ki nyumong ba se ni gyuwarwa. Anta di inchi lan gyuyong tu disturbing emotions ni ta dini gyuwa maanche dini tongso ni. Di ngoni pe nying chebuchido inchi di nga zu beba lan nyumong ba se di to zu chi lobchong janghen tang dini mato di tsik rangi lamsang sebuchimido ba. Ani inchi la disturbing emotions seyondo digi pe korangi jile di sebuchibi teyongodo ba jile tang ngobodi. Di tsik di shira nying cheburesha inchi ki lang yobadi.
The Buddhist term, which is in Sanskrit, is klesh, and then Tibetans translated that as nyumo. Then in English, the translation I have seen a lot is disturbing emotions, also afflictions. We use these days a lot for translating klesh, but disturbing emotions is such a nice, really neat translation, because when you tell any Tibetan nyomon, unless they have studied in the Shedra, like in monastic college, the Dharma, this term doesn't really say anything to them. Nyomon, like they wouldn't know this Dharma terminology. But in English, it's very direct and very relatable, disturbing emotion, right? Right away, we can see the function of that state. We can see the essence, right? It disturbs us. So I think it's very good. Don't exist in English in that way. Although translated in English in that way.
So, tenin ta tring niluk se de la ni yebe nan ni chidang kunjubam lamgi kapki dan niluk se tu skole na digre se tini dendam ki niluk se tini ngi chudu jime ki na mitu ni shuge yins.
Well, that's it for today. I have spoken at length about the natural state, which is which kind of pertains to relative natural state of phenomena, the one that is realized on the path while we still traverse the path. And in the next Dharma session, I'm going to speak about the ultimate natural state.
Janchu simchu rinpoche mage banamage gyurenche geba nyambara meba yang gone gondo pelbara sho